statistics on this, Bill. Levitated by the human touch.
Here's the pass. Antonio's through. Chance of 4. What a goal! What a brilliant strike by Michail Antonio!
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Knees Up Mother Brown podcast. This week we are without Callum, you may see, struck down by COVID. Spoken to the Premier League and they've judged that we can still fulfil our regular fixture as long as we dip into the under-15s to fill the squad, which is where young Jack Elderton even here comes from. Good evening, Jack.
Disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful. I'd just like to note that on record for everyone. That's a shocking intro.
I told you I was going to make the joke. You didn't know how bad it was going to be, though. This week we will be looking at the Leeds game from yesterday. Crystal Palace, what seems like a lifetime ago now, but only a week or so before. And a little bit of transfer talk, as well as Jack's desperate to make sure we were watching the AFCON as well. Before we do start in full, I'd like to point listeners towards the fantastic set of articles that, what would be these two are producing at the moment. You'll find a new player analysed every single day of the transfer window, which means you've got 10 days to catch up on already if you're behind and you've missed them. If you haven't seen them already, find them on the Knees Up Mother Brown homepage or through the Twitter account for Knees Up Mother Brown, or even either of these two lads. Again, I'm going to keep saying either of these two lads, which is Callum, which is WHU_analytics, or Jack, which is at Jack Elderson. Any players in particular you're looking forward to, Jack, in those?
Well, we had quite a lot of fun today with Braylen Bolo from Borussia Mönchengladbach, someone who's been linked for as long as I've been alive, probably if I've been in the under-15s. No, just a fun player and someone who we've long looked at as someone who's a stylistically good fit as a replacement for Antonio in the future. Not necessarily quite there in terms of form, not necessarily always been there in terms of fitness. But if you're looking for someone who stylistically is very, very similar to Michail Antonio and would be able to fulfill a number of roles across the front four, and also, is at a level now as a 24-year-old that's acceptable for a rotation option, and has a lot of room to blossom into someone who could be a real physical presence in the Premier League at the point at which Antonio is no longer viable as a first option. Then he seems like a great pick. Obviously, the major problem is the finances of any possible deal, and it depends a lot on who Mönchengladbach want to get rid of out of Alassane Play, Thuram, and Bolo. We're pretty sure one of them will leave at some point. Just not quite sure who that will be yet.
I just feel like we've been linked to all three of those as well. So it's probably,
yes, we have.
Every other day is one of them that seems to be the new. And Bolo's a player I like quite a lot. I guess his fitness concerns are one other thing that always pops up as well, I guess. Shout outs all around. Thank you for those who've been listening and getting in touch, especially to SH, who sent in a lovely photo of himself to the forum, decked out in a full Spurs kit, though. Bit odd. Joffrey, who's been indoctrinated by the podcast, he now watches every hop and skip of Fabianski's feet on every save. So I'm sorry, everyone. I'm really happy that Jack's ruined football for someone else, because it's what he's done. Diogenes, who thinks the two lads who usually are better than any TV pundits, and I'd imagine, of course, without him actually getting in touch, but I imagine, of course, to West Ham's biggest fan, Flamengo striker Gabriel Barbosa, who we all know was in the chicken run. We all in the chicken run. We all know him as Gabigol, obviously, but it must be a listener, as he's West Ham's biggest fan, at least according to Sky Sports and his agent. Anyway, if you'd like to get in touch, especially you, Gabigol, all correspondence can be sent to any of the following: the email address, which is podcast@kumb.com. There's the forum thread at kumb.com, and you can tweet us or the boss at Twitter, kumb.com, all words, no punctuation. So, through to the fourth round, Jack. It's a trip to Kidderminster for us after a comfortable victory over Leeds, you'd say.
It's a great fourth round draw, isn't it? I'm just excited about it, just because it's pure FA Cup energy, and it's been too long that we've been playing these cup games against your Man Cities, your Man Uniteds, and it's great to have a proper cup tie back. And I really hope that we field a decent team. But yeah, it does offer an opportunity for us to rotate as well a little bit, because with the amount of games we've had, you'd imagine that we'll be pretty pleased to have that chance. But yeah, the third round match, I almost look at Kidderminster. I'm sorry if any Leeds fans are listening, but I almost look at Kidderminster as a harder fixture than playing Leeds at the moment, because Leeds, wow, impressively terrible. Again,
not the team that they certainly were vaunted as last year. I mean, to their credit, it's been they've got a lot of injuries, and
yeah.
Bielsa will not buy for the sake of buying as well. He's certainly stubborn, I guess. So because he wants players of a certain type, he will go to his youth squad. They've had COVID, they've had major injuries. I think Bamford got back and injured himself celebrating on his return as well. Sometimes when it's going wrong for you, it's really going wrong for you. But
yeah, and you feel almost as well that because the injuries have been so continuous, they've never really been able to get any rhythm. It's not like they've suddenly been hit by a raft of injuries all at once. It's been all season. So the disruption throughout really, difficult for them to establish even a first 11 throughout the whole season so far.
I'm sure that we'll have many fans excited for the trip to Kidderminster. I think last time was 94, 5th round, 1-0 win thanks to Lee Chapman.
I'm coming on that, as you know, I'm in the under 15, so
you barely alive. Of course, you would have been knowing it. I mean, I would have been 5, and the only reason I can remember that off the top of my head is because I looked before we recorded. I'm not going to pretend that I've got that kind of knowledge there. At 5 years old, wouldn't have known at all. But yesterday, I suppose we've touched on Leeds being bad, so we could start there. Really, we were good, but Leeds were awful.
Yeah, you want to praise us because it was a comfortable win in the end. I think we managed to make it look actually a lot more difficult than in reality it was. And the fact that Leeds had the opportunities they had in the last 10 minutes or so to get back into the game, I think reflects really, really poorly on us, given how bad they were, particularly in the first hour of the match. But yeah, Leeds, I mean, I did a tweet on this the other day, and just it's incredible to me that they've managed to pull together a group of players that you almost look at as be more suited to being a running club than a football club. I'm not sure there's a single player in there who's any good at passing the ball. They run around a lot, and you have to credit them for the intensity of the press and the way that they force you to speed the game up. But when they get it, they're awful. Really, really terrible lack of quality in possession.
No, they've got one player at the moment really could play, Rafinha, and he was on the bench as well. And then he didn't look at all interested when he came on. He looked like a man
when he came on.
It looked like a man who was thinking, I'm not staying here, whatever happens. So
it's the first time I've seen him come on for Leeds or play for Leeds at all, and just look like he's had enough. And I'm not really surprised, because given how devoid of ideas they were before that and the lack of quality around him, it does look a little bit concerning, I think, for Leeds at the moment. You start to wonder, particularly with the injuries and the fact that some of them are quite long term, where this is going to turn around from. I said earlier in the season, it concerns me if Adam Forshaw can be your best player in the Premier League 4 weeks on the bounce. So at any point where you're in a situation where, and Adam Forshaw's a great player, but he shouldn't be for where Leeds want to be in the league. He shouldn't be your best performing player for that length of time. So it is sort of shockingly bad at the moment.
Good news for us, obviously, because we play them again in a week's time again at the London Stadium. We've got them at home again soon. So I'm not sure if Bamford's back in time for that or not. I presume Rafinha starts, but
there'll be some changes for sure.
Look at that. I think we should be winning. There's a possible. No, it's not the possibility quite that Zoom will be back for that one. It's possibly later in the month, isn't it?
I think it'll be later than that, yeah. But
it should have a certain level of confidence. I suppose if we talk about us, then we move away from what Leeds were doing. One player I noticed, I thought had a good game, certainly in spells anyway, maybe not consistency, was Nikola Vlasic, who, when he was moving into the centre and when he's in the centre of the opposite opponent's half, he suddenly came alive. Other than, I will slightly be disappointed, let's say, in the dive where he chopped and just flopped. But it was 2 times in a row he chopped very successfully and turned his man. Yeah. And he suddenly sparked to life when he got that chance, kind of 40, 30 yards centre of the Leeds half.
Yeah. It seems to be starting to come together for him, which is great timing. With Ben Rama away at AFCON, um, and I've seen a lot of people commenting as well, which I think is a relatively fair thing to say, is that we've had a lot of players that have come in under Moyes, and that have taken, or just players over the last few seasons that have taken some time to adapt. Fornals was one. Ben Rama another in that area of the pitch that didn't necessarily come together for them when they first arrived, but then sort of second season and on, there's been some improvement, and that Vlasic is sort of somewhat ahead of that curve, to where those two players were. I think that's sort of fair, but then you do look at players like Bowen and Suchek who landed and were able to impact straight away. So it's not entirely an accurate reflection of how signings have worked at West Ham in recent times. Similar with Lingard, huge impact straight away. But it's pleasing for sure to see his influence on games growing. His ability to impact games across longer periods is definitely growing. I think we saw, even when he first played against Southampton, that there were glimmers of really positive moments in that game, but it was only moments. He was really struggling to string together, and in all of his appearances after that, really up until the last few games, he was really struggling to string together even 5 or 6 minutes where he would really have a positive influence on a game, and I think we're starting to see that now, which is really exciting for him and for us. But what you commented on is really apt, and that's when he's in the centre, he seems to be so much more comfortable than when he's out wide. That the difference of receiving with his back to goal and being able to use his body, which he does so well, to protect the ball from midfielders and opposition defenders, and then spin and get running at the opposition, to receiving wide and being faced up by a defender. Just seems to be a completely different player when he's in those areas, and hopefully the coaching staff are learning from that and starting to be able to see that that's where he needs to be really to thrive for us. And also really importantly, in terms of his tracking back as well, he's much more comfortable defending from that central position than he is when he's placed out wide.
I certainly think if you look at the first goal, and there's a lot to talk about there, arguably, with the controversy around it. I mean, I'm one who really thought he could have been our sub striker in things like Europe. And you look at the way he rolls his man for that goal. That's not something I would think Lanzini, Fornals, Benrahma, or even Bowen probably could do. It's a skill he's obviously somehow he's learned one way or another. And it's kind of almost classic centre forward play in a way. You use your back in, and he's spun his man to do it. I mean, that was opened up the game in really what could have been a rather flat situation, which came from a lot of really good Antonio work as well.
Yeah.
But that's something you get in the centre, which you're not going to get the opportunity to do out wide. It just doesn't.
Well, he's just never going to be in situations where he can show those skills in wide areas. And you're absolutely right. I think out of the number 10s we've got and the wingers we've got, in terms of someone who's got a profile to play in that sort of false 9 or second striker position, Vlasic is definitely that guy. And I said it much earlier in the season that, if we were looking at someone who had the profile to replace Lingard's influence in terms of final third impact, creating goals and scoring goals, perhaps not impacting games across 90 minutes in the same way that a Lanzini can or a Fornals can, perhaps not showing that level of control, but being able to impact with goals and assists, then Vlasic was that guy. And I think hopefully we can start to see some of that across the next month. But saying that, there's someone else who's performing remarkably well in that position right now, so his opportunities might be a little bit limited.
It's a problem for him. I mean, arguably for Fornals coming back in, it's a good problem in the squad. Lanzini is having a really good time. He's added goals lately, which is the thing that everyone would say is what he doesn't have and why you maybe wouldn't pick him, because he doesn't score. He's reacted really well to that on the first goal. Which on that first goal, the only justification so far I've seen that makes sense to how you wouldn't call it offside is if the block by the defender is considered a deliberate enough action, or when it's scuffed post defender, the defender flicks it towards goal, and that negates Bowen being offside. I know you're quite good on the laws generally with these things.
I think this is really simple. Law 11 stipulates pretty uncompromisingly that this should be offside. I cannot understand how it's been looked at by VAR and not given offside, it pretty clearly states that if the player gains an advantage for his team in any way or tries to interfere with play in any way, it doesn't really matter if they touch the ball or not, from a deflection or a save, then and does so while being in an offside position, then it should be offside.
If Vlasic goes to kick the ball and it doesn't move forward and then it's bundled by the defender that way, I presume then he's not offside. I think that's the best. It's only something that's been discussed on the forum generally, and I said that's basically. I think we've got lucky if that's the view the referee. If the VAR official has said, I think that actually the defenders moved it on forward. I'm guessing you could argue that interpretation, but it's certainly very fortunate for us.
I don't think that's what's happened. I think what's much more likely is that the VAR official has taken a much more sort of common sense approach, in which case I understand the decision, but that's not how refereeing works. You have to abide by the laws, and
Bowen actually doesn't affect anything.
No, exactly. The law stipulates that Bowen's offside, so it should be given offside. But I think the refs viewed it several times. I mean, when I was watching it and watching the VAR official replay it several times, you can almost see the replaying of whether Bowen touches the ball or not, to sort of, and that Meslier is fully outstretched and that it doesn't change anything in any way whatsoever. That it would have been a harsh goal in that sense to rule out as offside. But like I said, none of that is completely immaterial. The law is the law. He's offside. It should have been offside.
If I'm looking across the game and who I put as a standout performer, I thought there was a few good performances all round. Bowen was dangerous at least in patches, and as is his game generally. At the moment he seems to be, if you square him up, he's going to beat you, and he's got that energy at the moment. But the man who really seemed back to his best is Antonio.
Yeah, absolutely. He was absolutely brilliant here. He was very good against Palace, and very, very good in this game. I think we discussed this briefly pre-pod, but one of the really funny things is the similarity with the first game against Leeds, where he scores the winner at the death, and in that game he places himself on Cresswell for long stretches of the game, which is Leeds were in a similar position then and forced to play an under-21 defender in the back four. And he did the same thing here, really, in positioning himself on Hjelde. And similarly with the first game, didn't get anything out of Hjelde as he didn't get anything out of Cresswell. And then realizes, well, okay, if I'm not getting anything out of the under-21 player, then maybe I'm not playing particularly badly. Maybe they're just doing very well. So if I go and play against Diego Llorente, Spanish international, maybe I'll get a little bit more. And then he just rinsed.
He destroyed the ball. I think I tweeted the game during kind of, at what point is he, as a defender, thought I'd best get touch tight to this very muscular and strong player, and thought, well, it didn't work the first time, and I don't seem to be able to push him down. I'll just do it again, because Antonio it got quite funny, really. It was just, he got really close. Antonio turned, he'd come back at him, Antonio's shoulder. He bullied him.
Yeah, totally, and that's something that we all love to see from Antonio, and that we've needed to see more regularly on a recent basis. That kind of dominant bullying kind of display against opposition centre-backs. And actually one of the major disappointments of the Leeds game was the fact that we didn't pull away in the first hour. I know a lot of people have described the game in that first half an hour as not having very much in it. We were more comfortable than I've seen us in any other game this season. It was so unbelievably, unfathomably easy for us to get into the final third and into positive situations. And the fact that we didn't create more from that is the only thing that really came from that game that was a major disappointment. Perhaps actually the most damning indictment of that was Ryan Fredericks not passing the ball. I mean, that was just absolutely glorious, wasn't it? Getting away down the right and having two cutback options under no pressure.
He had two moments where you can see why people get really excited about him, and those two moments both ended with the reasons why I don't particularly like watching him play. The first one where he scuffs it with his studs on the shot through, and the second one where you can visibly see a man struggling to choose what to do, because he had two good passes on. And I can't choose between those two, and I've taken a long time, so I'm just going to go alone. And it's the problem with, you can see why he's been probably quite easy to upgrade. There are real strengths to him, and certainly I found it quite funny in the first half where they'd gone, we've got Dan James quicker than nearly anyone. What should we do? Put him out towards Ryan Fredericks, the only man on this pitch who's going to keep up with him, which was
and one of the few players in sort of top flight football that would be able to keep up with him.
The very much baffling object where Leeds just do what Leeds are going to do and not pay any attention to what everyone else has to offer. I guess another thing about Antonio is the key, actually, other than that, back to his bullying best, the two goals are really made by his passing. His running. So that first goal is a very good bit of patience. The pass into Vlasic is brilliant. And obviously the second goal, you could see his head. He was constantly on the swivel looking up. He's passed that to Bowen. And it's a big part of how we play, is if he's being able to pass the ball and keep the ball.
Yeah, his composure's massively improved over the last couple of weeks. And that's great to see that back. I think previously we've even seen him sometimes being able to roll his man and get into those positive situations where passes on to trigger a counter attack, and often he's misplaced those passes over the course of the last month. And in some of the games around 4 weeks ago, like the Arsenal game, we were looking at some really horrific pass accuracy totals for Antonio at the end of games, talking in sort of 45% terms, which is strikers are generally going to have lower passing accuracy than most players on the pitch, because the passes they're having to make and the pressure they're under when they receive the ball is much higher than any other player. But 45% is completely unacceptable, and we've seen an improvement in that. He's now sort of steadily above 60%, which is still not great, but he's improved on that from where he was. And and it's just that seconds pause before you do something, and not rushing it. And maybe I think maybe that just comes with goals. You score a goal and suddenly you feel a lot more comfortable, and you're not just trying to do everything so quickly that actually things are going wrong. So he just looks much more comfortable on the pitch. He looks happier.
He does look fitter as well. I mean, I think if we use this as a perfect time to kind of blend to Palace as well, what he did in that Palace game for his goal was kind of maybe something he wouldn't have been doing when he was scratching and searching for a goal, which was just very, very simply just doing the simple thing. And he did that. It was perfect striker instinct, wasn't it, for that goal against Palace? Benrahma's ball, absolutely perfect. And that, really talking about the goal, you have to mention how that is what Benrahma should be doing. And that's the archetype of what we want from Benrahma on the left. Yep. Antonio has done the perfect job with it.
I'm claiming total credit for that Benrahma cross as well in Mourinho fashion, because I tweeted after the game beforehand saying that Benrahma was the worst crossing winger in the entire Premier League, and potentially the worst crossing winger I'd ever seen. And then he goes and does that. So obviously, he reads the tweets, gets angry, and then pulls out his best form. It's a great cross.
Mourinho, if you could say he's just the weakest player. Everyone's weak if you're Mourinho, aren't they?
It's funny, isn't it? It's really sad that everywhere Mourinho's gone, suddenly he's just been beset by these weak characters. I
do. You've got to feel sorry for him, because otherwise you might have to blame him. The
shocking misfortune that when he leaves, they suddenly turn into strong characters again.
It's something's going against him.
Yeah, there's some sort of universal force conspiring.
It might be his own character and personality. I don't know whether we can accept that sometimes our actions have consequences. I can't be there to judge that. If we go from Antonio, we go from Palace. You can't talk about Palace. In fact, we could, if we were talking about anything Palace, really, we could spend the whole time talking about Lanzini, who was shouldn't we?
We should really. It's a shame. It's a shame that Cal's not here, because I'd love to hear all the nitty gritty numbers on this and just spend half an hour talking about Lanzini. And unfortunately, I can't quite do that for you, because it would be a very boring half an hour monologue about my favourite passing player that's played for West Ham in a long time.
I'd like to see how you can justify numbers on what he did with his left foot for that goal, because I'm not sure. Those are for the people who don't like stats. We look at those, that's unquantifiable. It was magic.
It was absolutely brilliant, and he's always loved London derbies. He's got another couple here, and he's always loved scoring screamers. And it was the archetypal Lanzini performance, a screamer in a London derby, in an excellent performance where he rarely gave the ball away and controlled the game so comfortably. So, I mean, that first half performance, I've said this a couple of times this season, but one of the best individual 45 minutes we've seen so far this season. I think I've mentioned a few. I think Rice in the second half against Burnley, in that game. Antonio, I think it might have been the first half against Leicester right at the start of the season, and Lanzini here in the first half against Palace falls into that category of just sort of 9, borderline 10 out of 10, almost perfect. He was just brilliant.
I mean, he's always. I remember a video years the Payet season. He did a video about why he doesn't lose the ball in tight situations, and I think it's just the dexterity of very close control and being able to move his feet, and that's kind of shown in that goal, because the reaction to be able to flick a ball up and instantly volley it, basically.
Well, it's just raw ability, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it was George Ellick, who is another podcaster who I love. Shout out to the not the top 20 podcast, who spoke, I think it was on the Athletic podcast the other day, about how Lanzini really, when he's at his best, when he's fit and performing in the way that he is at the moment, he's arguably the best player outside the top 6. And when we have these conversations about, Rafinha's and Zaha and Jamie Vardy, and we're not really sure where Leicester fall in that conversation at the moment, but Lanzini's always been there when he's at his very best as one of those players. And right now, you look at the form that he's producing, and suddenly you think he's got to be back in with a shout of getting in that Argentina squad. It's just unbelievable.
It would be a lovely story for him to, considering where he was and how close he was to playing in a World Cup, if he finds his form and fitness in the year 2022 and ends it with a call up to the Argentina squad and getting to play in a World Cup with Messi as well, which I'm sure, as his friend, but also the legend that is Messi, and just getting to play a World Cup as well, which he fully deserves. And you'd be hard pushed to see why he wouldn't. He's got a technical ability.
This is the thing. He has the ability.
Magic.
Yeah, he deserves to be on the world stage in that way, because he's got that level of ability. The only thing that's held him back over this time is really his fitness, because he was slightly eclipsed by Payet in the season that Payet arrived, but he was outstanding in that season throughout. He was outstanding through repeated relegation battles with us after that. He was brilliant when combining with Arnautovic. And then the injury has obviously really massively affected his career and massively affected his play style. And one of the things we wondered for a long time, and we wondered through a lot of last season why we didn't see very much of him, was would he ever be able to recapture that final third impact? We knew he could pass the ball. We knew he could control games. We saw it against Burnley last season, where he came in and played a deeper role in that game and really helped us control that game and pick up passes where you need that sort of added poise and creativity around the box. And you sort of start to look at him and say, well, yeah, maybe he's becoming more of a sort of withdrawn 8 who can control games from deeper positions, where there's that little bit less pressure on him, and he can sort of show his brilliant passing ability and his close control to get himself out of tight positions against presses. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, when I think none of us thought it was ever going to come back, there's this goal-scoring tennis back. And given that he's developed all of those other sides of his game through coping with injury and coping with a lack of pace and coping with actually really a lack of confidence in what he was doing in the final third, if he can recapture all of that as well, you've got a really complete special player on your hands. And I don't want to go early here, because we've had a couple of weeks where he's scored goals, and one of them's a penalty, and screamers are not repeatable and all this stuff. Maybe they are if you're Manuel Lanzini, but if he can string together some form over a couple of months now, we're in for a really exciting time.
And it's very needed, because I mean, it's quite interesting so far. We've talked about Lanzini, we've talked about Vlasic, players performing in that central position, and in a January window where you expected the whole month is going to be just Lingard's name is going to come up nearly every day in the month, and it's just might not need to, I suppose. And it could be counting your chickens before them. I mean, it's a little bit.
Well, no, it just takes the pressure off
of player, but it does. There's no need for it.
Just takes the pressure off of it. I mean, I was speaking before the window and saying that, before we had the centre back crisis, that actually number 10 was one of the key positions that I'd be looking to recruit. And I remember Cal saying, "What on earth are you talking about? We've got Vlasic, we've got Lanzini, we've got Fornals, we've got Benrahma, that they can all play 10. We've got this range of excellent number 10s at the club." And I was just, none of them are scoring goals. And you need 10s that are scoring goals. And the fact that Lanzini's there and producing goals now, and Vlasic looks like he could really have that in his locker as well, and is creating goals through his hold-up play and his protection of the ball and his key passing, because his key passing numbers are starting to get into that territory that is really, really exciting. It just takes the pressure off. And yeah, if we get Lingard in, that would be brilliant, because it adds another body into that part of the pitch, and potentially allows us to play that sort of much more defined, almost 4-4-2, 4-4-1-1 shape, where we can be really counter-attacking and a massive threat out of possession, particularly with his pressing style as well. But it's no longer a necessity. If Man United want to draw this out till the last day of the window and then he becomes available, we can do that. We can do that.
I suppose the other thing is, if you look at his goals, I mean, as much as the Palace one, genius, hard to recreate. What he was in the position.
Yeah.
That ball has fallen and he's been in the right position, which is that's
same in the Leeds game. He's just in the right position. The ball falls and he's there. He's in the right area to make an impact in the final third, to get on the end of things. And Fornals had that for a little bit, and he hasn't had it so much in the last few months. And Benrahma had it at the start of the season and then didn't have it for a long period. And Lanzini seems to be capturing it now. And the big benefit for Lanzini is when Lanzini captures that, he's a much better player than the other two. Much, much better player in all the other senses than the other two are.
Been interesting because the blend is really good there. You've got Lanzini, who's quite a good incremental passer and option. Fornals came on yesterday, and you saw that kind of ability to have his head up and swivel, and quite a direct pass. He's quite good doing that under pressure.
He's fantastic at picking out long passes or medium distance passes, just one touch and smashing a pass away across the pitch. Brilliant at that.
Yeah, and then Vlasic just coming alive in that centre forward. I suppose you could, if you were looking for the luxury, you go, well, if we had Lingard as well, we've got someone who has that running.
Yeah.
Whereas Bowen maybe is the only one in the squad at the moment. Antonio, different type of player, obviously further forward, but it's just
like you're saying, it's such a luxury to have such a variance of options in one position, and that allow us to play so many different ways. And actually, one of the big things I should probably comment on Lanzini before we move on is, one of the things we've been talking about, and one of the things we talked about a lot in the last podcast, was the blend of the midfield and Rice and Souček, and how things work in that area. And if there is one player that's got a profile that allows both of those players to exchange when they go forward, it's Lanzini, because he's got the footballing intelligence to be able to cover when people go forward, and to not need such a structured and defined system in that one goes and one doesn't. And I can stay up or cover when I see Souček going. He's very, very good at just dropping a couple of yards in and being that protecting presence when Rice and Souček go forward themselves. So he just allows that balance to function a little bit better than it has been doing for the last couple of months.
If we talk all those positives and we talk about a stability being brought by a player, I think we have to talk about an instability being brought by another player. And we've won that game. We were 3-0 up for a long time against Palace, but the 2 goals, the big chance at the end, and I'm afraid to say again, it's Issa.
Shame Cal's not here, so you can't direct this question at him.
No, I can't direct this question at him, and I would have, Cal. I really would have come to you. His decision-making, abysmal for the 2 goals on different ways. Abysmal for letting the guy go on the first goal, for not trying to make a header, for not changing his position so that he could have made a better header if he'd done so. The second goal, the tackle for the free kick is outrageous. We're late to recording the podcast because we spent so long watching those goals again in slow motion and watching things Diop just hasn't done. The second goal just could have moved in and stopped the free kick going where it was going. Hasn't bothered, doesn't want to. And then the chance at the end has Mateta, decides the ball where the ball is in the air, doesn't want Mateta anymore. Ball's floating in the air, doesn't want to attack the ball either, just goes backwards and allows a chance. you shared an image with me of where he is percentile wise at the moment of defenders in, is it world or Europe?
Europe, top 5 leagues.
Top 5 leagues of Europe, and he's shockingly bad in nearly every aspect, isn't he?
He comes out in nearly the bottom 10% in nearly every area of his game, yeah.
Which, I mean, I've broken. We were going to do a bit with breaking down the goals bit by bit, but to some extent, watch it yourself. If you watch those YouTube highlights, listen to what I've just said, and what I've just said is basically what Jack taught me. So if I can learn it from Jack, you can learn it from me.
Yeah, this is what I mean. You've nicked what I was going to say, but this one is exceptionally simple to break down, and I was going to say just that. Stick the Sky Sports highlights on. It's that easy. Skip to about 220 when you're at the last bit of the game. Put it on 0.5 speed and watch a series of insane mistakes being made by one centre back.
And if you also want to watch what the other centre back is doing, he is in books, in films, you often have the person who represents the audience. Craig Dawson is all of us as he turns after each goal, and that chance at the end just looks at Issa Diop with an anger and shock on his expression and in his body language.
Confusion is the real key thing.
Confusion is. It is a bit like kind of, you're sure, mate? Because I don't think you are. But, I mean, it's great news that Zuma might be back before the end of the month, early next month. I kind of hope it's early next month so we don't rush it, because if we rush that at the end of the window, suddenly it could be a real drama. Yeah. But the worry is, of course, that at the moment we've had a few reports now, Craig Dawson playing with an injury.
Yeah. I mean, we cannot. We cannot progress through the rest of the season with 3 centre backs fit. One of them just coming back from injury, and one of them carrying an injury. And one of them just being terrible at the moment.
One of them carrying the curse of being Issa Diop.
Yeah, exactly. So I just think that's mad. So I do think we need to recruit a left centre back, and I think really it would put us in a strong position to be able to sell Diop on in the summer, where he's still got some kind of resale value left. So I think that would be a good thing for us anyway. It must be said, Issa could be a great centre-back in the future. He needs some composure. He needs to find that confidence in his own game to be able to make more proactive and sensible decisions. But here, again, he's blighted by that kind of Yannick Bolasie styled, I don't know what I'm doing, sort of mental approach to challenging situations. And you touched on it briefly, but the best way to summarize Issa Diop as a footballer, and definitely as a player for us over the last 2 years, really, and perhaps even longer, is the final chance against Palace, the chance that Mateta has with the overhead kick, which Dawson has been blamed for by almost everyone. Everyone on Twitter was slating Dawson over this. I read articles that were saying, what's Dawson doing, allowing him to have the time to set that up? And if you watch it at 0.5 times speed, you will see Diop has both hands on Mateta. And then as soon as the ball is played towards the box, he takes both hands off Mateta and takes about 3 steps backwards with his hands in the air going, I don't want none of that.
And that's the thing. You can forgive him maybe in letting Dawson. The player's running across. Dawson, you have him, but he has to do something himself. It's the game at that point isn't over for him just because the man's gone. And I mean, I don't want to dwell on it too long because I feel we can be harsh, and we have touched on Diop before, which is kind of why I cut through it quite quickly. And I think just go watch it 0.5 speed yourself, and if you look at those and think, any defense you have for him will be light, is what I suggest. You will have a defense that is, you're being polite at the very least. I think that's the problem here. He did it in the Leeds game. There was that pass to Rice where he left us short and he caused an attack that was a dangerous attack. He just keeps making big mistakes. Dawson is by no means perfect. I think you were saying that there's errors leading to shots in both of their games.
This is we've gone from a situation where there might have been 1 or 2 errors leading to shots in games from these two to now you're getting to the point where it's sort of 3 errors each leading to shots in games, and that is completely unsustainable. If you come up against much more prolific attacks, Palace should have scored 3 goals against us in the first half. The halftime score should have been 3-3.
So on another day, we might not have been
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Everyone can enjoy Chris's air of vindication here.
Off record, I said on another day we might not be winning that. Jack was livid with me at the time during the game. Seemed quite irate to argue with me, and I just said, just on another day. That's all I'm saying. And so it's just quite nice to not be the idiot for once. Maybe I don't know.
No, you were spot on. You were spot on. But I was enjoying taking my nephew to his first away London match. So
stop enjoying things. That's what I'm here to tell you. That's what I'm here to say. Okay, I suppose the other part of that game was the interesting bit with Johnson and Masuaku.
We'll do this very quickly. I got slaughtered for this the other day, but the key thing to understand here is Johnson was very good going forward, but was getting he was struggling against Jordan Ayew. Jordan Ayew was running the game from a Palace perspective. There were two things going on. Jordan Ayew was very successfully carrying the ball up the pitch, unopposed, getting far too much yardage from where he was receiving the ball, and Edouard was finding the pocket between Soufal and Souček far too easily. There were two things going on that were causing us really big problems. And the one that we addressed was the halftime switch to bring Masuaku on for Johnson. And I know most people are focused on the last 15 minutes of the game and where Masuaku does get slaughtered by Elise, who is a fantastic player. And if you watch their game against Millwall, you will have seen just how talented this guy is. And I think, put any left back up against him at the moment in the form he's in, I think anyone would struggle. But Masuaku actually restabilizes the game really well prior to Elise coming on, because one of the things that we really needed to do was be much more aggressive against Ayew, and he does that, and that stops Palace from having the kind of ball carrying that they were getting in the first half. So they were struggling to get to the box as regularly as they were, which was very important for us establishing the kind of control that we had for the first 25 to 30 minutes of that second half. When Elise comes on, Masuaku, being not the most intelligent footballer in the universe, tries to do exactly the same thing against the player who's got much better close control. So against Jordan Ayew's speed of thought may not be in the position where he's able to react as quickly when you're rushing up and pressing high, and Masuaku was getting all of these interceptions and his tackling was perfect. Elise, however, is just going to flick the ball past you. And that is what then happened in the last 10 minutes of the game, and that is one of the things that's really problematic about Masuaku, is he doesn't quite have the adaptability to be able to say, okay, I've tried that once against this guy, it's not working, I should probably adapt the way I'm defending. He'll just try and do the same thing over and over again.
Where it's interesting enough, if we'd started the game with Masuaku and then changed to Johnson when Elise come on, you'd feel like the result would have been much better.
Yes,
Johnson usually is quite cautious and quite an intelligent defender for the most part, and also cutting inside wouldn't have bothered it.
If we'd had rolling subs,
yes,
and we could have brought Johnson back on, it would have been great.
Right there. Well, that's those two games. I mean, I'm going to ask you, we could talk about your articles again and talk about players you've got left to discuss. I know you'd like to keep it quiet. I know you had your guessing games on Twitter. I had Kempf in my head, and I kept looking at those replies thinking, no one's guessing Kempf, and I thought, I talked you too much. It's not fair.
That would be cheating.
Yeah. So I don't know if you'd have there's a name here that I know I can get a reaction with, and I don't know if you'll have discussed in your articles, but I want to bring up because he has been linked to us recently. Sure. It's Adama Traore.
Oh God, Adama. Okay, that's an interesting one. I wasn't expecting you to throw that.
No, and because I know that I'm one of. There is a section of us, a few people who actually there's that part of me that thinks generally my argument is pace doesn't lose value, and he's probably not going to lose value, so he might be worth the risk. And actually, his shot creation level's not so bad numbers wise. His goals and assists are appalling.
He creates chances. You're absolutely right. He creates chances with incredible regularity. He like you said though, he doesn't score or create any actual goals, which I would say is quite a big problem for a forward.
It's interesting statistically wise. When you look at someone who's creating shots and creating chances but not getting assists, at what point do you blame a striker, other than eye test, obviously? And what point do you start to think that's a problem? He's obviously not creating.
I think the point at which you start to blame the player themselves is when they've done it for 6 years or something like that. Which is the case with Adama Traore.
I find it interesting because if you're creating those chances and your numbers are quite good, why aren't you getting those assists?
Because he's clearly not creating high quality chances. So he comes up very high on metrics for volume of chances created, volume of shots created, but he comes up very low on metrics for volume of good chances created, for actual goals, which would be coming from good chances that he's creating. He's not doing that. You look at his crossing. His crossing is patchy at best. Sometimes you get these wonderful deliveries, and sometimes you get him, smashing it into row Z when he's trying to cross. So for me, I understand why people. I mean, God, like, let's get on board the most chaotic evil front two in world football. I'm so for that. Let's play 4-4-2 and have Adama Traore and Michail Antonio up front. Defenders would just start running away as soon as we got the ball in defence. It would just be like screaming, running towards their own keeper because of the pace in behind. But in practice, really, as much fun as that sounds, that level of chaos, I'm not entirely sure who's going to be sticking the ball in the back of the net or who's going to be making the chances for who.
Not worth it at 20 million as a risk then.
It's a huge risk given the fee, and actually I think Adama's future might be more in what Spurs, the suggestion of him going to Spurs and playing as a wing back. That might be more where Adama finds his home, where he can really, similarly to how Conte used Victor Moses, as someone who struggled to retain that final third impact consistently, but had the pace and dribbling ability to cause problems from a wide area where there would constantly be overloads because of the system. I think that's probably where Adama will end up finding his sort of position eventually.
And before we go, one more on your players. Who, if you were to pick one of your 31, who you'd like the most?
Oh God, well, you haven't thrown that at me.
Yeah, I know. I've thrown that at you because I don't have to be kind as a host. I just have to ask some questions. I get to.
Well, I'm not going to pick someone who's gone already. I have to pick someone who. Sorry, no, I'm not going to pick someone who's coming because I don't want to ruin it. I'm going to pick someone who's gone already.
Of the 10.
Of the 10 we've done so far, it's a toss up for me between Adam Klozek and Arthur Cabral, and I think Adam Klozek just about wins it for me. I know he's someone that a lot of people think is just being linked because he's a Czech youngster and all these Czech links and so on and so forth. But he's a great player with a great set of attributes for his age. His physical build really excites me, and I think his development over the last 12 months or so, or less than that, over the last 8 months or so post injury, where we've seen a drop off in goals and assists, but we've seen this real development as a ball carrying threat, someone who can spin in central areas similar to Nikola Vlasic, and use his body really effectively against centre backs that 2 years ago would have been much bigger than him. He's adapted to his change and build really, really well. And I think if he can develop those qualities for the rest of this season and come out of this season as a really well-rounded ball carrier, throw him back in as a striker in 2 years' time with all of those abilities that he's developed playing deeper, you have a really exciting, complete centre forward.
Nice to add a check to the Vampire and Mr. Potato Head and Ant-Man. And that is a joke about nicknames that I find really funny that I keep seeing West Ham people mention. Well, before I go, you want to talk about AFCON because you have been watching AFCON, and by all means, go ahead.
Chris has got 5 aside, haven't you? So I'm going to do this very, very quickly. But the opening game of AFCON's being held in Cameroon this year, and for anyone that's not watched so far, I really recommend watching. It's a great tournament. It's been fun so far. Some of the games today haven't been brilliant, but the opening game was a great advert for the tournament and for African football more broadly. But the backstory to that game was fantastic in that obviously you have to do the round of COVID testing before the game starts, and Burkina Faso's COVID tests before the opening match came back, quite a lot of them positive, and a lot of the players that came back positive were key players and also the coach. And there were these murmurings in the Burkina Faso squad that there was something fishy going on with the COVID tests. There was something not quite right. So then they appealed to CAF and said that they had questions over whether the COVID tests had been falsified. and they gave the time that the doctors had arrived to do the COVID test, and CAF responded saying that they hadn't actually sent CAF doctors to do the COVID tests at that time. So the Burkinabe squad have suggested that there's been a conspiracy by the Cameroonian FA to send fake doctors to return false positive COVID tests to get all of Burkina Faso's, who are the main competition for Cameroon in their group, to stop their key players from being able to play in the opening game. So with all this very entertaining off-field stuff as the backdrop for the game, when the game began, there was some excitement for what could ensue, whether it would be quite a heated match. And within 30 seconds, we got our answer, because straight from kickoff, the ball went forward for Cameroon, and one of the Burkinabe centre-backs just flew into one of the most glorious slide challenges you'll ever see. If you haven't seen it yet, just Google.
Is this the video you sent me yesterday where the guy's leg is up diagonally for the whole tackle before he gets to the man, as if he's going, I'm going to kick you, and it's your job to get out of the way, mate.
It's borderline attempted murder, I think. There's absolutely no need for it whatsoever. His foot is about as high as it could possibly be from a sliding position. And just his body position is glorious. You'll find pictures on Twitter. He's got one arm all the way out on the ground. He's got the other arm splayed out 90 degrees in the other direction. One leg about as high as it could get in the air, and the other one bent 90 degrees. So he looks like he's performing some wonderful yoga, really, at high speed, and goes flying into the Cameroonian forward. And that set the tone, really. From then on, I'm not sure if it was football or UFC, but whatever it was very entertaining. That's
all that matters. You've got to get viewers on. I mean, a round of 3 1-0s so far today, but
yeah,
it's a fascinating tournament, and it's fresh. It's proper tournament football as well. I mean, it's a shame, really, that you've got to pay for it on Sky over here, and they've made very minimal effort, as far as I can tell. One commentator,
very minimal effort,
feed that you'd get from anyway, you can get it for free on YouTube in other countries. Use the same feed. It's a shame that they've beat someone like BBC to it, because you feel BBC would have put proper effort in.
I think we'll see. I think we'll see more effort once we get to the knockouts. I think hopefully we'll see a little bit better coverage then, and definitely pick up the tournament then when we get to the knockouts. Some of the tech on show is brilliant. Some of the players are just wonderfully skillful on the ball. So they're exciting games to watch nonetheless. And towards the end of the tournament, we'll start to see some real titans of African football going against each other. Those kind of Ivory Coast versus Ghana, Senegal versus, I think even, there are some teams that could go really far, like Mali or Guinea this year, that are really exciting to watch. So there'll be some really, really entertaining games towards the end of the tournament for sure.
Hopefully, just for the laugh, Egypt go really far, and Mo Salah has to stay out there a long time just to annoy Liverpool fans. It's what we're all in for that as well.
Yeah,
sure.
We are.
And on the note of let's see if we can annoy Liverpool fans, I think we'll end, which means for us, we'll see you next week, hopefully back with Callum. We should hope that he's recovered and he's feeling better.
He should be returning a negative test by then and be back in training by...
Yeah, we'll see. Otherwise, we'll have to call someone up, or maybe we'll sign a player from abroad or loan someone from PSG. I don't know. That's the threat we'll use anyway. But until then, thank you very much.
Roger the relegator on an emergency loan.
God, I'd kill for Roger on the pod. There's the dream. Get Roger on the pod. Right. But until then, thank you and good night.
Right, so we're here in the offices of a Late Late Show with the host of a Late Late Show, James Callum.
Hi.
Big West Ham fan.
Yes. And big knees up Mother Brown man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm regularly on the general discussion page. There's always someone who's got some information, so I love it. Yeah. It's great. Yes, it's excitement surrounded by imminent disappointment. That's what it mostly is.
Get on the forum at kumb.com. Come on, you irons.